I am Sidney Hugh Pitts. I was born on the 3rd of April 1928 to Fred and Ivy Pitts. My place of birth was number 2 Fernley, High Street, Donington. Fernley was one of 3 adjoining cottages, all owned by the Norringtons family. One of the other 2 cottages was occupied by my Aunt Pauline and her father, my great-grandfather, William Norrington. Just around the corner, in Old Lenham Road, lived my grandmother, Josephine Pitts, née Norrington. Walnut Tree Cottage was her home. My grandfather, Walter Pitts, had died before my birth. My childhood in Donington was happy. Friends included Dennis Wood, Douglas Carrier. When I was very young, I was the proud owner of a pedal car. Later, when around 10 or 11 years old, I made a box cart or a trolley. The legs of Stuart Pitts, my cousin, provided a seemingly inexhaustible source of power. The vehicle was constructed using a Tate and Lyle sugar box, mounted on 4 pram wheels. It was steered using a length of rope, whose ends were tied at each end of the front axle. We spent many hours bowling a steel hoop through the village using a skid. A skid was a length of wood or metal, curled at one end. The skid was run around the inside of the hoop to impart motion. I attended Donington School from the age of 5 until I left education altogether, age 14. I regularly absconded from school, continuing a habit begun on my first day. With the search party out looking for me, my Nanny Pitts, née Norrington, would find me in her outside toilet, hiding. Nanny would lead me kindly but determinedly back to school. Mr. Bolton farmed at Court Lodge, where he kept a number of Jersey cows. We could buy milk from Mr. Bolton. The milk was sold in half-pint, pints and quarts. While still a schoolboy, I would deliver Mr. Bolton's milk in quart bottles. This included cycling up to Mr. Jeffries, who lived at Donington Place. During the war, half of the Donington Place was commandeered by the army. I delivered milk to the officers' mess, where I would be given a bacon sandwich for my trouble. Just the thing before school began for the day. For some years I was a member of the Faversham Sea Cadets, cycling from Donington to Faversham twice weekly with Douglas Twyman and Dougie Carrier. On the return trip we would stop at the George Inn at Newnham, where we purchased a sandwich of beetroot and cheese, costing 6p. I was about 13 or 14 years of age. At around this time, 1942, I made a few shillings from pumping air through Donington church organ. I operated the large bellows by pulling on a wooden handle. If I allowed the air supply to run low, the sound of the organ grew fainter until Pauline Norrington, my aunt, the organist, shouted, "Pump up, Sidney." Normal church services paid nothing at all, but work for a wedding might earn as much as 2 shillings and 6p. As a boy, I spent many happy hours at the Cuthbert's farm with Henry Cuthbert. Henry was about 10 years older than me. In Henry's company, I developed an interest in farming, learning much that I would later put to good use on my own farm. In later years, Henry, myself and other friends would journey to Lenham in Henry's Austin 10. Charlie Spain and his band often provided music for us at dances in Lenham, and I remember one evening Henry and I laughing at an inappropriate moment during the band's playing. Charlie Spain and his band stopped playing and refused to continue until somebody apologised. At the beginning of the fruit picking season, travellers would arrive in Donington and neighbouring villages. They would bring their beautifully painted horse-drawn caravans, set up camp in a wooded area and stay from June through to September. The work included cherry picking, plums and hops. Where the horses grazed the verges, their owners would make clothes pegs from hazel, harvested from local trees. Travellers were an important source of farm labour, without whom the harvest would have been more difficult. As a boy, I would go with my father Fred Pitts to feed the silver foxes for Mr. Tibble at Leywood Hill. Mr. Tibble bred and raised silver foxes. They were reared in pens until large enough when they were killed and their pelts sold to the fur trade. During the war, working for Elvis Transport, I acted as driver's mate on lorries, loaded with Kent fruits and vegetables up to the London markets. We would leave Kent at midnight, arriving at the markets Covent Garden, Spitalfield and Barrow at around 2 o'clock in the morning. During the blackout, lorries' headlamps were shielded so that the light shone only onto the road immediately in front of the wheels. The army had set up searchlights and anti-aircraft guns around Donington. When German aircraft were spotted on their way up to London, the guns would fire without warning, frightening the daylights out of us. Our return to Kent followed a detour to Silvertown, where we often picked up sugar from Tate and Lyle or animal feed for Kent farms. These goods were stored in Donington at Elvis Transport, from where it would be distributed. I do not recall rationing making a tremendous difference to our diet. These working on farms received an extra 2 ounces of cheese per week. Beekeepers were given an additional allowance of sugar. Even before the war, families would supplement their larder with homemade jams and preserves, homegrown from vegetables and home-reared farm animals for meat and eggs. Rabbits were a special source of meat, very lean and preferred by many people to beef. I recall Frankie Russell, who lived at Newnham. He would visit the Checkers public house on Saturday nights, where he entertained with music from his squeeze box. People were happy to sing along, and Frankie received liquid payment for his efforts. Tokie Higgins, who lived on Checkers Hill, was a casual labourer on local farms. His father, Harry Higgins, kept a lime kiln at the bottom of Leywood Hill, where today there is a wood yard and water pumping station. Tokie would help his father at the lime kiln on occasions. Dr. Selby was the local doctor. I remember his arrival at Sunnyside Cottages one day when, under the influence of drink, he tripped on the front step and fell into the house. Dr. Selby lived at Linstead and served villages in and around the area. Nurse Atkins was a regular visitor to the village. She rode a motorcycle, on the back of which she carried a large black aldle, suitable for carrying a set of plumber's tools. Mr. and Mrs. Mowat kept a general store opposite the Chequers, selling everything from sweets, cups of tea, freshly made to order at the back door. Doughty the butcher was in business from my earliest memory. They would deliver meat in a Trojan van which ran on a large chain mechanism not unlike a bicycle. Mr. Jarvis kept a general store, including butter, cut off a large block, tea measured out from a large tea chest. He also sold clothes, hunting snares, kettles and various pots and pans and utensils. Behind Doddington Garage, Charlie Horn kept a general store in a small wooden building. In later years, the property was acquired by Bill Servetto, who kept the shop running until closure when Doddington Garage bought it. The garage was run by Percy Neves. We would pay Percy sixpence to charge the accumulators for our wireless sets. Outside the shop stood a machine for dispensing Wrigley's chewing gum. 1 penny would buy 1 packet of chewing gum. However, the machine sometimes produced 2 packets by mistake. After some time, we children had worked out when the fault would occur, and had marked the machine accordingly. So we kept a close eye on the progress and spent our penny at the crucial moment, the original 2 for the price of 1. Captain Jackson set up a coffee business at Court Lodge. The farm had a granary in which Captain Jackson would roast coffee beans. The beans were bought in hundredweight sacks from the London docks and transported by Elvis lorries to Doddington. Captain Jackson sold on the coffee in small bags, some of them supplying Jarvis's shop. On entering the shop, the aroma of fresh coffee was overwhelming and extremely pleasant. In 1952, Doddington celebrated the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II with music and dance. It was here that I met Brenda Sage, my wife now of 59 years, with whom I have lived and worked and now enjoy my retiring years. For many years, a point-to-point event was held at Downcourt Farm, Doddington. It was a major event, drawing a large number of spectators who stood in old farm carts and wagons to gain a better view of proceedings. My girlfriend Brenda Sage, now my wife, would cycle from Frinstead to Doddington to attend the point-to-point. Brenda would leave her bicycle in the care of Mr. Servetto, who would park it at the rear of his shop, charging a few pennies for this safe keeping. During the war, a number of local girls and women volunteered for the Women's Land Army. Daisy Foster joined from Doddington and wore the uniform comprising a hat, green jumper and beige-coloured breeches. They undertook work on farms which had lost manual labour to the armed forces. The war saw Piner Phillips leave Doddington never to return. I remember Piner was an excellent boxer. Also Bronco Rayfield worked with us on Elvis Transport, but lost his life during the war. Seeing friends leave Doddington to fight for King and Country was the incentive for me to join the Navy. My father, Fred Pitts, was a sergeant in the Home Guard. Dad's job was to keep the stores for the Home Guard in the attic of our home. Various local people that were short of a coat or boots for everyday use would call upon Dad to help out with army supplies, not so much off the back of a lorry, but out of the attic. A number of people joined the Home Guard. The dispatch rider for the Home Guard had a push bike. We called him Woofty, but I think his real name was Frank Davis. Woofty only had one working leg, the other being a stiff leg. His bicycle had been modified to accommodate Woofty's lack of leg power. The stiff leg side had a step to rest his leg on, while the other side, with the good leg, had a pedal. At the beginning of the war, the man in the Home Guard just had an armband with LDV on it, Local Defence Volunteer. After time, they graduated to a uniform and rifles. I remember in the early days of the Home Guard, before the arrival of rifles, the chaps had to arm themselves with broom handles. I recall sitting in the outside toilet at our home when 2 landmines were dropped at Doddington Court, a distance of a mile or more. I remember yelling to my mother that all of the tiles had gone from the toilet roof. At least for us, it was just the tiles from the toilet roof. Poor old Horace Champ at Milstead had the misfortune of having a Spitfire land on his home. The house was flattened. Luckily, Horace had not been at home when the Spitfire came down. Doddington had the Rag and Bone Man. He also visited Frinstead, as my wife Brenda remembers him calling at the family home. We all enjoyed the luxury of eating rabbit, and when the horse and cart belonging to the Rag and Bone Man arrived on Saturday, we would sell him the rabbit skins. Another notable character in Doddington before the war was Bill Long. Bill Long came through the village selling peanuts, and I remember the luxury of bananas on Bill's cart. These subsequently became scarce with the onset of war. On a few occasions I remember helping Bill push his trolley up Whistling Hill. In exchange for a few peanuts, Bill had lodgings at the Yew Tree Public House in Whistling. Thank you.